We're going to talk a little bit of football here now. We've got Fintan O'Toole from the 42, and we also have Martin Carney. Martin, great to have you on. How are things with you?
Good, no, not a bother, Shane. Thank you.
Good. And Fintan, yourself, how are you doing?
Well, Shane, how's the form?
Not too bad. Do you know what? Can we get straight to talking about the goalkeeper situation? Martin, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. Obviously, it didn't work out fully for Rory Beggan in this particular game. The turnover that led to the goal in particular when he was turned over. We saw Ethan Rafferty, who's, a forward playing outfield for Armagh. Like, I was nearly thinking about it. It's a risk-reward situation. It's like, driving up the bus lane for years and accepting that the inevitable €60 fine is going to come, but it's nearly worth it overall.
Yeah, I don't know. To me, it's madness. Shane, really? I just think it's absolute madness. I mean, Mayo haven't gone near that yet. They have Robbie Henley, certainly a top. Well, he's not a top scorer for them, but a regular scorer. But all of his scores are from free kicks. But it seems between Rory Beggan and Niall Morgan and Ethan Rafferty yesterday, it's a trend at the moment that a lot of intercounty teams have seemed to embrace. But I think after the situation in Monaghan yesterday, when it all kind of blew up in Rory Beggan's face, I have a feeling that a lot of people will reprieve it or will go back on it and actually maybe just say, no, the risks are too great and the rewards are minimal enough. Like, it was quite extraordinary yesterday. I was at the game in Roscommon, between Mayo and Roscommon. Ethan Rafferty again and again into the wind in the second half, took off like a top-class sprinter. It wasn't just kind of ambling up the field like Rory Beggan. He was going at full tilt and joining in the attacks. And towards the end, I think Matty Ruan just lifted his head. On one occasion in particular, there was definitely a goal on had he had a punt from distance, in a little bit like, for example, the way Kerry were able to get their second goal, or Clifford was able to get his second goal with that long ball into the empty area, so to speak.
What do you think, Fintan? Do you think the risk is worth it?
Well, definitely it wasn't for Monaghan yesterday. That's probably the most blatant example in terms of how that game turned around with the 2 goals. And I suppose it's probably most striking that it's kind of one of the pioneers of it that has been caught out. It wasn't someone that's a bit inexperienced. Like the first one, the one that was punted in long towards Clifford, I kind of thought the pass wasn't on initially. I don't know who actually gave it into Beggan, so I think there's a bit of a blame both ways kind of for there. Flip side then is that I know maybe it was hard to mouth stuff, but I actually thought Aaron O'Neill performed quite well for Kildare in kind of relieving the pressure at various times. I'm sure given the circumstances and given they're trying to hold off Dublin and they had the buffer, that goal throughout the game, I'm sure supporters probably were a bit more nervous, especially when he's kind of a bit younger and a bit inexperienced. But yeah, look, I can see the value to it, but I think there's definitely maybe an element of opposition kind of wising up to it now, and there is more of a kind of a press on it. And I thought it was interesting. It wasn't like O'Shea maybe tried, obviously he tried to find Clifford, but he did just punt it, and it was straight away, let's maximize this chance while we can. And obviously he was very, very alert as well for his own goal. So I wonder, it just looked maybe something that they had discussed beforehand in terms of an update in Skeen, and they really, really were trying to capitalise on it.
Yeah, in the game actually against Dublin, Mayo had against Dublin, Robbie Henley tried it, I think in the 16th minute of the first half, and he just simply lost his bearings completely. Like, Robbie is a goalkeeper out and out, doesn't play outfield with his club, never has played outfield for his club at any level. Whereas like Ethan Rafferty, I think Niall Morgan are regular outfield players with the respective clubs and are comfortable on the ball in outfield situations when they come into contact, so to speak. But certainly what I saw yesterday with Beggan, I think that'll kind of prompt a reappraisal by an awful lot of managers. And I think come summer, okay, you'll see a certain amount of it. You'll see some teams kind of have a belief in it. But personally, I would be totally opposed to it. I'm old-fashioned, I think. A goalkeeper, just stick between the posts, stop them going into the net and get your kick-outs accurate.
Yeah, because it could have gone against Rory Beggan in the Ulster final at Croke Park last summer. Remember when he got back and did that brilliant turnover, but it could have easily been massively expensive for him that day. I know they lost anyway. But Martin, seeing as you mentioned that you were at Mayo's win over Armagh, 15 points to 110, I mean, the way that Mayo refused to panic in that game, like Kieran Mackin got the goal after something like 14 or 15 seconds, bit of a fluke, and Mayo scored the last 5 points of the game. What are you seeing from Mayo this year and in this game?
Well, I've been at all the games as it happens, and in the opening game against Donegal, they were appalling, absolutely appalling in the first half. They were, I think it was 4 or 5 points down at halftime. They should have been 12 points down. Donegal should have had them dead and buried. And again, were it not for a wonderful point from Robbie Henley on the full-time whistle, they would have been beaten. The second game against, who was it? Against Dublin then. It was either Dublin or Monaghan. They improved somewhat, but I think the big thing that has stood to them this year, their conditioning is excellent, their fitness levels are excellent, but there's a sense of togetherness and collective understanding that has improved actually in the last year or two. The other thing I think that is noticeable is that their substitute bench this year, the gap between the subs and the starting 15 is minimal now. In the past, I often think one of the things that let Mayo down in All-Ireland finals and in big games in the last decade was the fact that the substitute bench was never able to improve matters significantly when they were given the opportunity. You know, you contrast that with Dublin, when Dublin would bring in Owen O'Gara, when they bring in Kevin McMenamin and guys like that. They always seem to kind of up the standard for Dublin. But it's interesting, James Horan has played Aidan O'Shea, Kevin McLaughlin, yesterday Pádraig O'Hara and Paddy Durcan on the subs bench, and when they came in, that four yesterday plus Jack Carney, I thought were outstanding and actually turned the tables on Armagh late in the game, with Durcan getting two of the points, McLaughlin one, and Jack Carney creating two of them. So I think the fact that they have had a subs bench this year in their last three games that has improved matters when they have been called on, I think that has actually stood to them.
What do you think, Fintan?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, it really just struck me yesterday, the quality of the first four subs. I mean, they're all on by half time, but I mean, that's for, okay, maybe O'Hara's coming to the frame a little bit later than the other three, but the other three have been kind of central players for Mayo for the last decade. It does show an incredible quality of reserve. You know, imagine probably all four aren't going to be starting on the bench come championship, that a few of them are going to be in the frame to start games, but I guess probably it reminded me a bit of their Monaghan victory in that it's very, very similar kind of a win to dig out, kind of an impressive win. You know, obviously they are technically playing away from home, I suppose, in all these games as well, even though I know they would have had a lot of support there yesterday. So I think they must be really, really happy with how that's going. But at the same time, I think Horan is kind of casting the net and kind of giving, you know, games that I think was Frank Irwin and Sam Callan. That was their first stats yesterday. I know Aidan Norm came on the last year's All-Ireland final, but he seems to be kind of getting more regular game time in this year's league, and that's kind of a springboard, I suppose, from the Knockmore success that he's had over the last couple of years, and he's kind of been a standout forward from what I gather kind of in the club championship and their county wins. So they must be really happy when they've looked at that fixture list and to have 7 points from the first four games, and it's really well set up now, I think, for that round 5 match in Tralee on the 12th of March, given probably the top two teams in the division so far, I think, 4 rounds in.
Martin, were you very concerned when you saw Tommy Conroy go down for the season? I mean, he's just such a fantastic looking player. And then Aidan O'Shea, I'm starting to wonder, is Aidan O'Shea going to be a starter this year?
Well, just go to the Tommy Conroy incident for openers. I was at that game, actually. I went down that night to Galway to watch the game. I think they were playing Letterkenny in the Sigerson Cup. And I saw the incident happening on the halftime whistle, and I didn't think an awful lot about it. Now, it was under lights. I was at the far side of the ground. I thought this was rather innocuous, but the extent of the injury actually, has been quite devastating from a Mayo point of view, because of all the guys that have come through in recent years, he's the one forward that has genuine pace. You know, a lot of the Mayo players, all of the Mayo players will give you everything. They're skillful, like young Orm, as you talked about, on the back of his campaign with Knockmore this year, you know, got a lot of confidence from that and has carried that through into the county team in the league. But Conroy gave them something extra, and his loss, I think, will be felt as the summer goes on. Aidan O'Shea, just from the word go, he seems to, maybe he's going to have to accept that his role from now on is not going to be as one of the starting 15. Now, how that'll sit with him, I'm not sure. But I know, from what I know, the lad, he'll simply want everything to go for the betterment of the team. And if he sees that, for example, his displays coming off the bench exceed maybe what happens when he starts, he'll probably kind of maybe accept that. But there's no doubt about it. Yesterday, the games that he's played when he's come off the bench, he's playing from the midfield area back towards his full-back line. That is his prime area of influence. I always think when he moves forward into the forward line, he slows the game down. He doesn't think as a forward. and he just tends to be ponderous on the ball. Whereas when he's in midfield and playing as an extra halfback, I just think he's wonderful. His presence is great. His tackling ability is second to none. And his ability to influence the rhythm and the tempo of the game, I think, is quite profound from there. And I would say if he is played as a sub, or even if he starts, whichever is going to be the case, it'll be in that role as an extra centre-back. And nothing other than that, actually.
So if those two guys, O'Shea and Conroy, who were in the starting forward last year, do they have the players to step in this year? Because like even Ryan O'Donoghue, who I think is quite an exciting player, I thought he had a pretty poor display against Dublin. I didn't think it was his day at all. Now you obviously saw the game yesterday. He scored 1 from play, 7 in total. Like, can he kick on to that next level again?
Yeah, I think he's a great attitude. I think he's, again, I've seen him quite a bit, underage all the way up, and he's a guy that has caught my eye, ever since he's a minor. I believe myself he can step up to it. He's extremely competitive. He's accurate, and his free kicking has been steady, has been good. Now, the big hope down here, of course, in Mayo is that Cillian O'Connor will make a comeback fairly soon. Now, Cillian O'Connor, obviously the leading scorer of all times in championship football. That's right across every one of the 32 counties. And his Achilles, we all know with an Achilles tendon injury, it can kind of make a fool of you. You think you're right, and all of a sudden you kind of break down again. But he has been out quite a long time now. I think the game that he got injured was against Clare last year in Ennis, in I think the National League, in a National League match. But if he can come back, and if Jason Doherty can kind of show the form that I think he showed in the Monaghan game, I think those two guys would be a big plus to the attack. But I just go back to a point that I made a few moments ago. I still think that the loss of Conroy will be felt as the summer goes on.
Fintan?
Yeah, it's kind of similar enough, I think, to last year's Mayo story when you're looking at the attack. I think that injury is just going to cloud things for a long time. Like, ultimately, for a lot of the year, I would have thought, I was impressed with how they were coping without Cillian O'Connor. I thought Ryan O'Donoghue was really stepping up to the free-taking responsibilities. He was showing great leadership there. And then Conroy was so exciting to watch. Like, the way he just took charge of that All-Ireland semi-final, particularly in extra time. Dublin couldn't handle him, it was just that kind of raw, explosive pace he had. But ultimately, I think when it came to the All-Ireland final, that was the day when we kind of realised that they did miss O'Connor, just that kind of experience and that extra scoring touch, maybe, kind of composure to finish one of the goal chances. So you just wonder then, okay, you've no Conroy this year, you have O'Donoghue. Is it asking a lot for like O'Connor and Doherty, given the injury problems that they've both had, that Mayo really, really need them to step up? Or is it too big an ask to expect like an Aidan Orme to really come into the fray very, very quickly, or Frank Irwin, this is only his first year. So I wonder, is the onus going to come on Ryan O'Donoghue even more from that point of view? Now, I've been really impressed with him. Just even like, I know it's kind of a small little metric and I know it's not the big thing, but just what he did in his club Belmullet, who didn't really have a great track record in the club championship over the last few years at senior level in terms of getting to finals, but just, watching some of the footage and reading reports, like he just seemed to carry his All-Ireland form, getting the Ireland final really into that, and he seems to kind of just become that kind of real leader. And I just love the way he sticks at it. Like, if things don't go his way, take the penalty against Tyrone and missed All-Ireland final, he still nails a couple of frees after that. You mentioned the Dublin game, agree with you on that, but he was still there in the second half, and I think he set up one or two kind of crucial points at the end. So I mean, and then further back the pitch, I think there's just a lot of signs of encouragement for Mayo. Like, I think if there's a very prominent league player award at the moment, I think Diarmaid O'Connor's got to be right up there. I think he seems really, really influential. Kind of what I've seen around the middle third. Interesting then from a Mayo point of view, what's his best position? Where does he best benefit the team? Is it the half forward line, or is he the midfielder alongside Matthew Rowan, or and then obviously further back then, look, the fact that they've Oisín Mullen has stayed, and I mean, we mentioned injuries, like when Owen McLaughlin went down in the Monaghan game, I thought, it looked like that the injury curse had kind of struck them again, and it was really a really significant blow. And then it was kind of out of nowhere. I was watching the Sigerson Cup, and he was kind of a late inclusion for UL in the final, so I think that's a big boost for them that they have them. So I'd say 1 to 12 in a very, very good shape, and it's maybe just that final couple of missing pieces to just try and figure out the inside line because of the Conroy absence. What role O'Connor and Doherty will have as the year goes on.
Martin, we'll talk about Dublin in a couple of minutes. Obviously, another defeat for them. But if we're to just take it as granted that it's a pretty wide open All-Ireland race this year, what you've seen of Armagh so far, do you see them as a team that can go deep into the championship?
I think they can have a good run the championship. Is it Fermanagh they're playing in the first round? I think in a few weeks.
I'll look that up in a second.
Yeah, in 8 weeks' time. I think they'll be, they'll be building everything towards that. What struck me yesterday about them, most of the game they played everybody inside their own 45-metre line and then broke in groups, broken clusters with great speed. I just feel if they had trusted their full forward line a little bit more. Rian O'Neill is an outstanding player. And alongside him, he had, I think, Nugent and Duffy. I felt myself, had there been a little bit more faith placed in them and a little bit more ball given to them and a little bit more emphasis on their attacking game, I feel myself that they could have gone on and actually won it. I just read in one of the papers this morning, Kieran McGeeney was very disappointed at the amount of ball they turned over as the game went on, late in the game in particular. But I just sensed myself that had he encouraged maybe a little bit more attacking more of attacking dimension to the game, I feel that they could have actually done much better. And I do think that he will get that balance right in time for the championship. But if you were to take, for example, in Ulster, I think the dark horse of all of them at the moment is Derry. Derry have had four wins, I think, on the trot. They, again, Conor Glass is back. Didn't he come back from Australia? And Rory Gallagher just seems to have them in pretty rude form at the moment. And just watch them. I think they're going to actually cause quite a bit of, they'll turn a few heads this year, I think.
Yeah, I noticed Joanne Cantwell saying last night they've actually won 11 league games in a row. If you go back to last year, their scoring differential from 4 games is plus 37. So that's very, very impressive. Just as you mentioned, the 2022 draw for Ulster, Donegal are against Armagh, and the winner will play Antrim or Cavan in the next round there. Do you have any thoughts on Armagh, Fintan, after the weekend?
I just think it's a defeat, but I just don't think it's a massive grave setback. I just think in the overall picture they're in a very, very good place. It's probably a good time to be taking stock now. 4 rounds in, you have a good bank of games to kind of judge a team, and kind of good evidence. I mean, they're third on the table, just ahead of Donegal. They lost again by 2 points, but just the goal scoring stats I just think are interesting to look at. They've only conceded 1 goal so far in their 4 games to date, and obviously Kerry are the only other side with that, and they're joint top goal scorers with Kerry with 6. Obviously the 10 points is probably the thing that hurts them there. But I mean, in terms of coming up against I suppose a kind of a seasoned Mayo team, and the fact that Mayo kicked the last 5 points, and go back to what we spoke about at the start of the conversation, but that strength off the bench just seemed to tell in terms of kind of Mayo having a kind of more powerful kick. But I think Armagh probably one of the sides in Division 1 that have to be very, very happy with kind of how things have gone for them so far. And if you think that last year, I know it's not quite as comparable because it was the north-south split, but they were in a relegation playoff. Our side, they managed to just avoid the relegation playoff. It was Monaghan. We're stuck in it, So I don't think they're going to have any of those kind of fears at the moment. And obviously there's bigger name counties that will turn to that are kind of in more in danger of the tractor at the moment with only 2 rounds to go.
Martin, as you watch Dublin, they've gone 10 games now since their last competitive victory, which was in the Leinster Championship last year, losing this time to Kildare, 112 to 12 points. What are you thinking when you're seeing this Dublin team and the way things are playing out for them?
Well, I think there's been an awful lot of hanging and flogging brigade out there, kind of being pretty hard. And there was always going to be this period of transition that they were going to have to engage with and endure. They were going to always have to bring in new faces to actually compensate for the quality that had departed. And you go back to look at their underage over the last number of years. I think, if I'm right now on this, Kildare and Meath, I think, have won, I think between them, 6 of the last 7 Leinster minor titles. And I think Dublin have only won 1. And I don't think Desi Farrell has the quality coming through, for example, that maybe Jim Gavin had to work with. And I just think he needs to be given time. At the end of the day, Shane, when you think about it, he's won 2 Leinster titles. He's managed Dublin to win 2 Leinster titles. He has also managed Dublin to win in All-Ireland. And he's in the process now of actually trying to cobble together a new team. A lot of the more experienced lads, I think, are playing from memory rather than from, with any great conviction right now. But I do think that if they can get their heads right and if they can rediscover this competitive gene within themselves, I still think they're going to be formidable this summer. And I wouldn't be out there kind of looking for blood if I were a Dublin man or woman right now.
Yeah, Colin Gooch Cooper was saying it is retrievable. So I'm wondering, like, to what degree is it retrievable? And what does that mean? Like, James McCarthy can come back, Owen Merchant can come back, Con O'Callaghan, there's probably someone else I'm forgetting there. Like, to what degree do you think is it retrievable?
Well, it's retrievable in the sense that, okay, I'm not so sure if they'll be able to retrieve the bad start that they have made in the league. And again, that's no big deal. I think Mayo were the longest surviving team in the National League until 2020, when they got relegated for a year. And it did them no harm to go down a division and maybe just, introduce new faces and get guys use the pace of intercounty football at a lower division. And I feel if that is to be the case with Dublin next year, it's not the end of the world. I don't think they'll be down there, for any long time or such. But there is no doubt about it at the moment that the quality that they had over a period of time, like, you always knew that the Dermot Connolly, the Brogan brothers, Kevin McMenamin, Owen O'Gara, all of those guys would give you, loads of scoring options up front. Those scoring options aren't there right now. And basically that is, and even Dean Rock, who, we know is so accurate, he just doesn't seem to have that competitive spark in him at the moment. But I think come championship, that's when you will see them retrieving some of the ground they have lost up to now. And I wouldn't despair if I were a Dublin fan, even though the league start has been, pretty lamentable.
Yeah, I mean, Fintan, if you look at it this way, Brian Fintan did have a chance for a goal early on. Very good save from Aaron O'Neill. So they worked a nice move there. Dean Rock also missed an early goal chance. They worked that pretty well. Brian Howard had that late chance after Aaron O'Neill got caught under the high ball from Sean Bugler. The game could have easily gone the other way. Kildare only won it by a goal.
Yeah, look, it was very, very fine margins with those goal chances, especially when you think of how Kildare's goal happened, that the ball just fell for Jimmy Hyland and he managed to get it over the line. But it's just unusual to see Dublin not kind of finishing those chances, I mean, they were the masters basically at goals where, it was this kind of necklace of passes and then it would come into someone like Niall Scully or Rock at the back post. You think of how many times you saw it in Croke Park and they would be finishing. It just seemed kind of amazing. I suppose we're judging them at their unbelievably high standards of the last decade, that they did manage to hit the net yesterday. And that is just hurting them, I suppose, that final kind of scoring touch. Because in fairness, I did think there were signs that the approach work was a lot better and defensively they were better yesterday than this was how open they had been, particularly maybe in the Mayo game when Mayo got those 2 goals, and obviously with the damage that Rian O'Neill had caused in the first Armagh game. I mean, team selection-wise, there was probably encouraging signs for Dublin yesterday with the familiarity that Johnny Cooper started, like Robbie McDade came off the bench, Killian O'Shea came on as a late one from Kilmacud. I'm wondering will a couple of more of those Kilmacud guys get a run? I mean, a couple of them were involved with Desi in 2017 when they won under 21, so they're not as young and raw physically, and a couple of them have been around O'Byrne Cup and leagues. I'm just wondering, are those the kind of players that you might have to start looking for now to kind of to beef up this squad a bit? But like the other element as well is that, like, I think, like we spoke last week, Shane, I suppose, about Kildare, this nearly meant tag, like a very, very spirited display against Tyrone, but they came away with nothing. There's almost an element like if they weren't going to beat Dublin yesterday at home, when were they going to beat them? Given, I suppose, the Dublin just slightly alien at the moment in the league. And, just watching TV, I thought it was very obvious that it was a pretty raucous atmosphere there. And the celebrations afterwards were quite interesting. I think they're understandable, but for a late February league game, like the one person that caught my eye actually was when the camera showed him was Johnny Doyle, who, judging by his hands, seemed to be kind of telling everyone else to maybe just calm down a little bit, that it is only the end of February, we'll see what happens when they meet them in Leinster. But I did think, look, in fairness to them, they've been kind of under Dublin's rule for the guts of a decade. I can understand the kind of emotion that came out. But I just thought that was interesting when it did kind of cut the Doyle at one stage at the final whistle.
Yeah, I mean, first win in 22 years over Dublin. I totally understand being really excited and really joyful after it. I just think I got a lot of flack on Twitter for this, Martin. I was just saying, the guy who brought out the massive flag and was waving it around the field, I thought they could have done without that, as in the players obviously didn't do it, but they could have done without that, because every I think if Dublin are going to meet Kildare and Leinster, what will be talked about from now until then is these lads think they can plant a flag and make fools of us down in Newbridge. I honestly think that would be used as a motivation.
It'll be used as motivation. It'll give them fodder, actually, when they play Kildare later in the year. But no, I can understand Kildare's joy. It's a very intimate venue, a very, very closed venue. It's a venue that lends itself to a great atmosphere. And the fact that Kildare yesterday, as you said, got the better of Dublin for the first time, was it in 20 years? I mean, it was cause for celebration. It's a little bit like watching Arsenal in the last few weeks winning games in the Premiership. They have celebrated the 2 wins against Leeds, for example, as if they had won the Premiership. And Kildare yesterday, I can understand the euphoria, I can understand the joy. Well, wait a minute. The championship is for the big boys. The championship is that really kind of decides matters one way or the other. And I think Dublin yesterday will be reminded and will remind themselves of the way Kildare actually kind of celebrated that victory at the end. And Fintan is perfectly right. There was fine margins yesterday. Those goaling chances at the beginning, at the end of the game, had they got in for Dublin. And remember, the Kildare goal was, I think, what word would we use? It was fortuitous. Somewhat, it was Mick Fitzsimons made a good save, and again it was flicked into the net. Those little kind of things, had they gone the opposite way, it was a Dublin win.
Has that done much for Kildare, do you reckon, though, in terms of belief, Martin, and also even just for the other teams in Leinster?
Of course it has. I think it has to be good for Kildare. Kildare, have a management of Anthony Rainbow and Glenn Ryan, great Kildare men. They're trying to kind of create a pride and a sense of togetherness and a sense of, ambition with these players. And when you look at the counties around Dublin at the moment, the likes of Kildare and the likes of Meath, there is no issue with population. There is no issue with money. There is no issue with in terms of tradition. And they should be better than what they have been over a long period of time. But as I said earlier, those victories that they have had in the last 6 or 7 years at Leinster minor level, I think that is going to maybe bear fruit in the short term. And maybe we will see them. We need to see them if the Leinster Championship is to have any credibility. We need to see those two counties, Meath and Kildare, much more competitive this summer than has been the case for far too long.
Yeah, Fintan?
Yeah, the other thing I was just going to touch on actually with Dublin, it was just interesting actually to just reflect last week and compare to Eamon Fitzmaurice's first year in charge of Kerry 2013 when they lost their first 4 opening league games and they looked in complete disarray. I think they only scored 4 or 5 points up in Castlebar against Mayo. I know Martin might remember that game, but they were kind of well beaten anyway. And there was this big crisis, I think, in the middle of that spring in Kerry. And as the championship turned out, they obviously won Munster again, and they ran Dublin very close in what was one of the great classic All-Ireland football semi-finals. So, it is, I think they'll definitely come back to the pack. There's no doubt about that. It is kind of interesting, I suppose, how quickly it's happened. But I suppose there's an element as well from Kildare's point of view. Dublin have a target on their back. They were the greatest side, and how much it means to these sides to kind of beat a big team like that. And maybe there's an element of that as well. Donegal, Tyrone on Saturday night. Tyrone now are the All-Ireland champions. I think one of their players had that phrase that we are now the hunted rather than the hunters over the winter, and how will we cope on that? And I thought from a Donegal point of view, I was at the game in Killarney, didn't think they were very impressive in that game. I know the weather was very, very poor. For a lot of the first half on Saturday night, they weren't really good, and Tyrone were kind of dictating the match. Right. But I thought, obviously, Conor O'Donnell's emergence has been brilliant for them, but I just thought the intervention of Paddy McBrearty, you want your marquee guy to step up. Okay, Murphy's off the pitch. He's not involved at the moment. Michael Langan isn't there as well, for example. But it didn't really look on, I thought, that goal. But McBrearty really just completely made it against a packed defence. And then, in fairness, Donegal just took off in the second half. Different guys thought Pater Morgan was making a lot of big incisions. Obviously, McKelvey gets the goal. O'Donnell, who I've mentioned, Oisín Gallen off the bench. And it just feels that they were really fired up for that second half. Now, I know they're near neighbours, and I know Donegal Tyrone is a big thing anyway, and they beat them in last year's championship. But just that sense of, we've seen it in hurling with Limerick as well, that you can't beat, I suppose, maybe that bit of motivation for a team, what a big league win can do, because they are the benchmark to run at the moment.
Yeah, but just going back to that game, actually, what I was delighted to see from a Donegal point of view is, with the exception of Paddy McBrearty, all the other players were under 30 years of age. There's a young fellow, Pather Morgan, I think he was playing centre-half forward. He was the guy that put McBurty in space before McBurty gave the pass for O'Donnell's goal just on the halftime whistle. And again, at the end, when he set up Jake McKelvey for his goal, or when Jake McKelvey got his goal, rather, it was Morgan that actually set that up. Again, I saw him in Sigerson this year in live and in living colours, so to speak, and was hugely impressed at his versatility. He can play defensively, he can play good as an attacker, but he's great awareness of what's around him. And I think that's a great asset in the player. He's not so much kind of concerned with his own game as bringing others into it. And I thought, like, when you think of Donegal in general, like the young O'Donnell lad who got a goal in 3 the other night, he's from Carndonagh. I remember a time when there wasn't a Gaelic football club in Carndonagh, where soccer was the only game played in the Inishowen Peninsula. Now you have kind of Quayla McGonigal, I think, is a Buncrana lad. You have Carndonagh lads. And it's fabulous to see areas that hadn't got a tradition, shall we say, in Gaelic football as such, kind of now being very central to the whole kind of push, for the county team in Donegal right now. And to have done this without Michael Murphy, to have done it without Michael Langan the other night, believe you me, that's a huge boost to their confidence. And I think it'll stand to them as the year goes on.
Martin, how important is the fitness of Oisin Gallen? Like, he's obviously been dogged by injury, but you can see him when he picks up the ball, he just looks like he's just that different level of class.
The other night, he has that little extra dimension. But again, as you said, he's been plagued with injuries. He's just found it so difficult to kind of get a run, shall we say, influence, bring his influence to bear to the extent that it should have been had he not been injured. And I think it's important from their point of view that he is right for the summer, that he is right, and that Murphy is right, obviously. But the guy also that I think, again, somewhat undervalued in many ways is Michael Langan. His ability to kick scores from play, I think, is second to none. In Donegal, there's an obsession at club level in playing short hand passing, a short hand passing game that goes right across the board. And I sometimes think when they bring that into the county, they forget that the kicking dimension is equally important. And I thought the last night they got the blend. Like, you remember, Fintan, you were down a week ago in Killarney. They wouldn't let the ball go by foot at all. It was all kind of playing, my own phrase, ring a rosy football, going around in circles, going nowhere. But nobody trusting their kicking game, nobody trusting their inside line. Whereas the last night, they did trust their inside line. They let an awful lot of kick ball through, and they reaped the dividends, so to speak.
Fintan?
Yeah, the other one actually I mentioned, the injury front there actually is as you talked about, Quayla McGonigal from Buncrana. Like, it was interesting, Declan Bonner looked pretty downcast after the Kerry game when he was talking about his absence. He rated him Donegal's most consistent player of the last couple of seasons. So I think they're hoping that injury seemed a bit worse than they first thought that he picked up against Kildare. So he's another guy, if you get back into it, that's kind of a more formidable championship squad. But yeah, I couldn't agree more in terms of like they were. I didn't think they were too bad in the first half against Kerry in terms of kind of being patient against what was a very, very strong win. Yeah. But just in the second half, they were just so slow and ponderous around the middle. And maybe it was a reflection on Tyrone's defending, but just the gap seemed to open up far quicker in the second half the last day. Like the Oisin Gallen point, once he kind of skipped inside, I think it was Pádraig Hampsey, the whole thing opened up for him and he went straight through and clipped over a very nice point. There was a couple of others during the second half. I really like Morgan, the fact that he really went for it, the jugular, in terms of fisting it across, because the easiest thing to do when he was coming in from the side, I thought, watching it, is that put this over the bar and it's a 2-point lead and just try and defend it. But he saw there was a guy inside McKelvey. I think there was actually another person on his shoulder, and he said, look, let's just put this game to bed. And then obviously it was kind of safe from there in terms of kind of finishing the game off. So the other thing that they did quite effectively was, I think, Ryan McHugh's positioning. Maybe not in terms of him impacting on the game, but it seemed to neutralise Conor Myler's impact more in the second half, because I thought in the first half he was carrying a lot of ball forward. He was kind of creating a lot of the gaps. And they also just seemed to get on top in midfield as well. Like, I thought, if you think back to the second goal that Tyrone got against Mayo in last year's All-Ireland final, the long kick out that was won by Colin Kilpatrick, they were trying that move on a couple of occasions in the first half to Kilpatrick or Kennedy, and then someone would go through. Now maybe Donegal a little bit fortunate that Tyrone were pretty wayward in terms of a couple of really good goal chances in the first half, like Kilpatrick, after scoring a really good one the week before against Kildare, hit a poor connection after the thing had opened up for him. That went wide, and then actually he was the guy on the end of another move, and he blasted it over the bar. So, but then look, you make your own luck. You're within touching distance at half time, and then suddenly out of nowhere, through the McBurty O'Donnell kind of access, you create a goal. And I imagine Tyrone going in at half time probably wondering how that they were at level, and then first on the goal, they capitalised on it and they took their chance. And I think both them and Kildare probably the big winners from the Division 1 action over the weekend in terms of big responses to disappointments the previous week and getting big victories under their belts.
Martin, where do you think Tyrone are at? I mean, last week they got that victory over Kildare, but Kildare were in a good position to win that game, just didn't see it out. And obviously they had a nice lead here, 7 points to 3, and then end up losing.
I'm not so sure where they're at the moment, actually. I'd say their managers, Brian Dewar and Fergal Logan, will be equally a little bit kind of concerned about it. Like when you look at it, when they won the All-Ireland last year, immediately I think, or within a number of weeks, 4 of their players had retired or, just put the intercounties scene behind them. And I just think at the moment they're struggling to find a consistency. Like Tyrone teams of all the teams, there's an abrasiveness about them. There's a contrariness about them. And yet there's always a very creative side to them. Now, the other night it was noticeable that Derek Canavan, when he got on the ball, in particular in the first half, caused consternation in the Tyrone or in the Donegal defence. But at the other side of the field, that what I call contrariness and just abrasiveness that Tyrone teams have, I haven't seen it this year. And unless they get that, Tyrone are going to struggle somewhat, because of all the teams, anybody who's played Ulster football will tell you, of all the teams that you dislike most playing against, Tyrone topped the list, because they're always awkward, they were contrary, they were highly, highly competitive, and they could make life a misery for you. But one of the constants with them is they always had tight marking defenses. They were never the biggest of teams, for example, but by Jesus, they would put you to the pin of your collar in terms of giving you grief for a full 70 minutes if that was needed to win, and that's not there at the moment.
So if we're to look at the other Division 1 game, Kerry went up to Inniskeen and won by 3-14 to 1-12 against Monaghan. Rory Beggan obviously had a couple of mistakes there. Probably maybe should have been able to cut out the first one that David Clifford finished. Obviously, there was the turnover for the other one. But Fintan, what did you make of Kerry? What are you making of Monaghan?
I think Kerry are probably the most impressive side all around. Probably in the division so far. Maybe just slightly shading it with Mayo, but I think it's been a pretty strong start for Jack O'Connor. He said last week that they have winning the league is not a priority for them in the slightest, but I think it may end up being the thing that they do, and like he's actually done it in both of his previous eras in charge. In his first season, he's managed to win the league. Probably falls nicely for them, I think, in football. You probably touched on this earlier, Shane, with the hurling, but like the fact that the hurling league, there's only a 2-week window between the start of the championship and final. They Kerry will have 5 weeks from the league final to win their play Cork. It's a semi-final game that they'd be heavily favoured, and you'd expect them to win. So I think they're looking to get a lot out of this. They're facing up into different types of challenges. The fact that they win at home in tough conditions against Donegal and on a tough Saturday night against Dublin, then they go up to Inniskeen and they win with a bit of grace, a bit of swagger to them in terms of the goals that the Clifford O'Shea have got. I think definitely the positioning of the two of them, and their O'Shea in particular in his best position at 11, having played a bit of 14 last year, having out of necessity played midfield for the first league game against Kerry. I think you see it yesterday. They get 3-5 between them for the 3-14, and I just think they've a brilliant partnership between them. For all the plaudits that Clifford gets, they ultimately have 2 generational talents that have come along at once for them, I think, in terms of the ability of the two of them. I think if there's question marks over kind of all the leading All-Ireland contenders, and if it seems a pretty even race, maybe at the moment Kerry are slightly ahead. And I suppose the one final thing I would say in terms of their defensive approach, just the thing I've noticed is I just think Tyke Morley seems to be the key to it. He's basically playing what I would think is kind of similar to the role Keane O'Sullivan played for Dublin. It's not an out-and-out sweeper role, but when they lose the ball or when the opposition are attacking, he is keen to get back and kind of patrol that D And then he has, I suppose, the likes of Diarmuid O'Connor. I think keeping him fit will be a big thing this year. And I think I'd expect him to kind of be having more of an influence in midfield as opposed to maybe wing forward roles in the past. I think he's kind of covering, and then Jack Barry alongside him, maybe if David Moran gets back. But it's interesting that they're not really experimenting much in their team. You know, I mean, like the guys they brought into the squad, say Dan O'Donoghue, who's a new guy, he's actually 26 this year. Jack Savage has come back into it. He's in his mid-20s. Greg Horne's in his mid-20s. I'm surmising that the management are looking at it and saying, this is our best hope of winning the All-Ireland. We don't need to rip up the script here. We just need to tweak a couple of things. And yeah, they look like a team that are kind of going all out from the very, very start.
Yeah, and then you look at like Gavin White, he's out, just a short-term injury. I think Stephen Okunbo, he won't be out for too much longer. He got injured playing for the club. David Moran probably be back in the short term too. Martin, do you think that this Kerry team, have you seen anything new from Kerry this year that would suggest that they've kicked on from last year?
Well, I just see that they defensively, they're, yesterday in Skeen, their ability to get a cluster of players around a threatening Monaghan player was quite noticeable on a number of occasions. Jack O'Connor seems to have tried to kind of up the ante in terms of their tackling and in terms of collectively forcing errors into the opposition. On top of that, I think primarily that's the main thing I've seen with them is just that extra aggression that's in their defensive approach. I think at midfield, Diarmuid O'Connor is playing exceptionally well for them. But up front, you have to say, the Clifford brothers, I think have just been outstanding up to now. As you said, it's once a generation, you get the likes of David Clifford coming around. But I just get a sense this year, Jack O'Connor sees maybe the season ends in July. It's only a couple of more months to go. And forget the experimentation. He's simply just trying to kind of get his team together as quickly as possible. And I just see at the moment, if you were to kind of, shall we say, label a favourite for the All-Ireland this year, on the evidence of their displays so far, Kerry are certainly way ahead of the pack. And it will be an interesting game, in Tralee on Saturday week when they play Mayo. But I just think in current form, they're carrying too much. They're just carrying too much ability and carrying too much understanding of that collective understanding that actually sets them apart from all others. And I just think they are the favourites. They are the out-and-out favourites at this stage, even though it's only February.
But do they have the steel and the bit of ignorance that you need to, the likes that maybe carried Tyrone across the line?
Well, that's true. That's the point I made about their defending. Their defending is so more aggressive than it has been in the last number of years. I think the criticism.
Is that Paddy Talley or is that Jack O'Connor? Because he talked about they had a bit of a record going in terms of not conceding goals until this weekend.
Yeah, and I think that's why he was disappointed maybe at conceding the goal at the very, very end of it. That I just saw the interview last night that he did in the Sunday game. And I found it strange. Here they were after winning by 3-14 to 112. And one of the things that he highlighted was the fact that they conceded a goal later on. I just said to myself, get lost, will you? No, look at of all the teams, they play exciting football. And when you have, as I said, the Clifford brothers up front, when you have, the way Sean O'Shea is playing from centre half forward at the moment. There's a trio of players on any given day. If they hit their best form, they'll make life a misery for any team. And the way also we have seen this year that they are varying their game, they're well capable of kind of flooding their own defence with numbers if that's necessary, but also they're breaking out from defence and their ability then to actually take scores second to none.
Yeah, I'll just run through a couple of the scores from the other divisions here and just throw it back at you then to see if there's any points you want to make in any other teams. Division 2, Clare, they lost at home to Derry, 10 points to 213. Offaly drew with Meath, 110 apiece. Galway beat your Cork Fintan, 322 to 217. Roscommon were very impressive against Down, 118 to 10 points in Park Esler. Very, very easy, and the Rossies could have scored a bit more. Division 3 then, Longford, they lost at home to Fermanagh. Louth beat Westmeath, Limerick beat Wicklow, and Laois drew at Antrim. Division 4, I saw Tipperary beat Sligo down in Thurles. Very good performance there. Wexford won away in London. Cavan, they lost at home to Carlow, and Waterford, they had a defeat to Leitrim. So is there any county in particular sticking out there that we haven't really talked about, Fintan, or any performance that you were taken by?
Just the gap in Division 2, Shane, stood out for me again. I mean, I can't remember the last time the second tier was a split. I mean, like the beatings handed it over the weekend. Like we had said, Galway and Derry and Roscommon are probably at the start of the league were going to be the front runners, but they're really showing that. I mean, very impressive to Derry to go down to Ennis, which has been a place where a lot of counties have struggled over the past couple of seasons, and to win by 9 points pretty comfortably in the second half. Obviously, Galway put up a huge score on Cork, and you have to factor in as well, Cork got 1-1 kind of an injury time. Galway had really taken control of that game. Once Sean Meehan went off injured, it seems like Cork's defence just kind of collapsed, and Shane Walsh in particular kind of ran riot, and Galway seemed to have a lot of attacking options further back. Probably conceding so much was probably an issue for them, and obviously Roscommon scored 118, and it's just interesting, like if you look at it, that like Derry 8 points, Roscommon 7, Galway 6, but then the scoring differences, like Derry are plus 37, Roscommon plus 21, Galway plus 25, and then the flip side, Offaly, Cork and Down are all minus 20 or worse off at the bottom of the table. Like there's just such a big gulf that I didn't think was going to be as great in this division, and I can't think of any other time in the recent seasons where it has been as pronounced in second division. And just with the Talton Cup factor, it just makes it, the stakes are going to be so high over the next couple of weeks. Like I don't think Meath, like probably the last couple of weeks, they've drawn twice against their relegation rivals now, Offaly and Down. I don't think either results probably did them much good, in terms of trying to get a win out of one of those games. Fair play, I suppose, the fact that it looked like they were destined for a defeat in Tullamore, but they managed to get a goal in the 75th minute to kind of draw level there. But like next time out now, it's interesting. Meath are home to Cork on Sunday the 13th, and Offaly are playing Down on Saturday the 12th. And again, in the consequence of the Sam Maguire Talton Cup, I mean, those games could be absolutely pivotal. And then like Derry, Roscommon, Galway, I think they all have to play each other as well. So the prize is pretty great there. But I mean, like if Derry do manage to do it, I think that's going to be pretty remarkable for a team that contested the Division 1 league final in 2014, then went all the way down to Division 4, and to be all the way back up to Division 1 potentially by 2023 is quite a story.
Yeah, absolutely. Martin, is there any of those points you want to pick up, or even just the green plan in terms of like the championship structure that's going to be in from 2023, and your thoughts on that?
Well, no, just basically going back to Division 2, what Phil was talking about, like Derry haven't conceded a goal in any of the 4 games. Like defensively, they've been very, very solid. And you say their score difference is at plus 37. The thing of the Talton Cup, like next year for Division 3 and Division 4 teams, what's the reality is this, that you're going to have 2 from, I would imagine, Meath, Offaly, Cork or Down in Division 3 next year. And that's quite remarkable. Like, I mean, of the last, was it 35 All-Irelands or something that have been won, like Cork, Down, and Meath have been kind of winners in those. So, there's high stakes there. The other thing about them also is that the teams that had their games postponed due to Hurricane Franklin a week ago have to play next weekend. So you're going to have the likes of Offaly playing 5 weekends in a row. And they have, they're in enough trouble at the moment with injuries. Like there are concussion injuries, there are there's 2 guys out with concussion, there's other lads have different injuries. And with a shallow enough panel, with a kind of they're going to find it very, very difficult to kind of garner enough points as the kind of season goes on, with the fact that they're going to inevitably pick up a few injuries in those 5 successive weekends.
And Martin, are you happy to see the green plan come through in terms of the reform of the championship structure?
I didn't give it a lot of thought, Shane, to be honest with you, but from what I've read of it, I think there's a bit of details still to be teased out in it. From the beginning, I was always reluctant to see the provincial championships, shall we say, relegated in importance. And, which would have been the proposal last year that a lot of people are hoping to get, was that everything in the championship would be based on your league, shall we say, positioning. But to me, that was relegating the provincial championships into second place. And I think for since the foundation of the GA, it has been the life's blood of Gaelic sport. And I'm just glad to see that they are still very much part of the new championship structure.
Yeah, Fintan, I did an explainer video on it, and I was wondering by the end of it if I actually made this any clearer, because like Martin said, there's an awful lot of detail in it. All the provincial finalists get through, and then the best placed league teams after that. And, from 2024, the Tailteann Cup winner will also be guaranteed a place in there. Are you happy to see this through? It was 94.7%, I think, passed it in Congress.
Yeah, look, I think it's a stepping stone to something better. Look, personally, I'm just not sure about the provincial system really anymore, given the way it's gone in a couple of provinces over the last couple of years. I think aside from Ulster, and in fairness, I think the Mayo, Galway, Roscommon triumvirate have made Connacht pretty competitive. But I don't know what's the absolute perfect solution, but like just the issue with kind of Munster and Leinster is a problem for the GA to kind of tackle. And in fairness as well, some of the kind of mismatches that we've seen in the GA qualifiers kind of develop. I think this is a kind of an effort to kind of enliven the All-Ireland series. In fairness, I can agree with you in terms of like these things can be pretty convoluted and complicated. And I felt a little bit of the debate about it beforehand. There was such attention and focus on what happened at the Special Congress last year, and no change happened, that this crept in a little bit more below the radar. Obviously, the fact that I suppose the matches have returned as well. I think in the off-season when that Special Congress was being debated and that was a bit more revolutionary, I think it was probably going to kind of garner a bit more of a debate. But look, one thing I've always kind of thought in terms of, I don't know, is there any chance of it going to happen? But I will go back to the 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B format in the league. I think that's one of the biggest issues in terms of, to me, the teams that are regularly appearing in Division 1 are kind of streaking further and further clear of the rest. And even someone like Roscommon, who it's almost like every second year they're in Division 1 at this stage, but they're still getting exposed to enough kind of top-ranking competitive football that I think it's making a difference. And I think that's one of the biggest kind of root causes in the imbalance at the moment.
Okay. Well, do you want to make any final point on that, Martin?
No, I'll tell you, Shane, I have apologies, but I have to run. I have to collect the kid from school.
Well, look, it was brilliant to have you on. Really appreciate you having it. And hopefully we'll be chatting again soon.
Appreciate it, Shane. Cheers.